You think that patch makes you somebody? The cadet's voice cut through the morning like a blade. His words landed sharp, loud, and meant to hurt. Hannah didn't flinch. She kept her grip on the folded blue cloth pressed to her chest, a ceremonial scarf embroidered with the golden insignia of her father's last command. Around her, a dozen cadets shifted in place, pretending not to hear. One snorted, another smirked. No instructor intervened. No one stood beside her. The scarf trembled slightly in her hands, but her back stayed straight. She was not here to be seen. She was here to remember. If you believe no daughter of a fallen soldier should be mocked in silence, type honor below. The sun over Fort Breckenridge burned with quiet authority, casting long shadows over the immaculate parade field. Flags snapped in rhythmic succession as cadets adjusted collars, boots clacked in unison, and ceremonial brass gleamed under the morning light. But Hannah Cole stood still, alone, just beyond the edge of the crowd. Her dress was plain, dark blue with modest stitching, but pressed with care. The scarf over her shoulders was what drew the stares. Deep navy, the color of dusk, and at its center a golden insignia sewn by hand, the mark of the 412th Tactical Command, last worn by her father, Brigadier General Richard Cole. She had arrived early, not out of pride, but because this was the only place where his name would be spoken today. Family of the fallen may proceed to the cadet terrace, the announcer's voice echoed. She stepped forward quietly, clutching the scarf in both hands. A few heads turned as she approached the lower seating tier reserved for cadet families and active service relatives. An officer at the railing, young, clipped haircut, pristine gloves, blocked her with a polite but firm gesture. "I'm sorry. This section is for immediate military relations only." Hannah met his eyes. "I am," she said calmly. "Brigadier General Cole's daughter." The officer's expression didn't change. He glanced down at a clipboard, then shook his head. "There's no Cole listed for seating here." Several cadets nearby had already noticed. A few whispered. One, the same boy who'd mocked her earlier, tilted his head in theatrical confusion. "Maybe she meant colonel, not general," he said under his breath, loud enough for others to hear. Snickers followed. Nothing bold, just the kind of laughter meant to bruise without ever leaving fingerprints. The officer stepped aside, directing her with a half-turn. "There's open seating toward the back," he said. Hannah didn't argue. She gave a brief nod and walked, measured and slow, toward the far edge of the field, where the chairs grew fewer and the ground less polished. Behind her the crowd settled. Music swelled from the academy brass. Instructors took their places. No one called her back. She sat near a rusted bench, the kind you forget to repaint during ceremonial weeks. The scarf with her father's insignia folded neatly in her lap. From here, the memorial statue was barely visible through the flurry of salutes and shined medals. But she didn't need to be close. The distance had always been there. Even when her father returned from missions, he had carried that same distance in his eyes, the weight of men left behind, decisions that never stopped echoing. And yet, he had always saluted her when he walked through the door. Now no one saluted, and she wasn't here for fanfare. She was here because someone had to be. The anthem ended. Applause rippled through the field, rehearsed and respectful. Cadets resumed formation. Instructors returned to parade posture, and the ceremonial flow moved forward, as if nothing had happened. But Hannah still sat apart, the edge of her scarf brushing against the dry gravel beneath her feet. From her angle, she could see the backs of 100 uniforms. She didn't need to see their faces to know how many had heard and chosen silence. She kept her hands folded, thumbs pressing into the embroidered thread of the insignia. Then came the voice again, low, confident, designed to strike without drawing blood. If her dad was so honorable, why didn't he teach her where to sit? It was the same cadet, same smirk. This time, louder. A few others laughed, short and nervous. One cadet raised a phone as if documenting a curiosity. No one stopped him. Another leaned toward the first. "Careful," he said, pretending to whisper. "She might cry and get us all demoted." The laughter grew. Not in volume, but in boldness. It wasn't rage. It wasn't cruelty in its rawest form. It was the softer kind. The kind that hides behind protocol and youth and unspoken hierarchy. The kind that leaves no bruises but draws blood all the same. Across the field, officers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes never quite meeting hers. No one called out the cadet. No one reprimanded the phone. And the scarf, the only thing she had brought of her father's, now felt like a target rather than a tribute. Still, she didn't rise. Her fingers adjusted a loose thread near the insignia's edge. She tucked it inward gently, like repairing something sacred. Then she exhaled, a long, quiet breath. Behind her, the announcer called out the names of the fallen, rank after rank, unit after unit. Some names received applause. Others respectful silence. When Brigadier General Richard Cole was read aloud, it passed like mist. Too soft, too fast. There was no photo, no pause. Just a name lost in the litany of sacrifice. And even then, the cadet behind her leaned toward another and muttered, "Wasn't that the guy who got ambushed overseas? Some legacy?" The boy next to him shrugged, chewing invisible gum. "I heard he froze. That's what cost his unit." It was false. And they knew it. But truth bends easily in the mouths of the ignorant. Hannah's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. On its flap, a single phrase was written in her father's hand. "Let them talk. You stand." She tucked the envelope beneath the scarf in her lap. Somewhere nearby, a camera clicked. And yet, not one adult said a word. Not one leader reminded the cadets of honor. Not one instructor called for discipline. It was a silence louder than the insults. But Hannah endured it the way her father had taught her, not by shouting above it, but by outlasting it. The sun had risen higher now, erasing the long shadows that once offered her cover. Sweat gathered at Hannah's temples, but she didn't move, until the voice over the loudspeaker announced, "Family members of the fallen may approach the memorial at this time." There was a pause. No movement. The chairs near the officers' terrace remained full. Most families had sent representatives or none at all. Grief, after all, rarely travels in uniform. And so, slowly, deliberately, Hannah stood. She gathered the scarf in both hands, folding it in half with care, the golden insignia now tucked inside like something sacred. The crowd around her didn't shift. One cadet, the same from earlier, leaned slightly and whispered to no one in particular, "Now what? Is she going to cry on the stone?" No one laughed this time, but no one stopped him either. Hannah stepped forward. The path to the memorial wasn't long, but under so many eyes it felt endless. The sound of her shoes against concrete echoed faintly in the stillness. A breeze passed. Flags rippled above, their colors proud and indifferent. She reached the base of the monument, a polished slab of gray stone engraved with the names too numerous for the space they were given. Her father's name was near the center, clear, precise, unadorned. She knelt. No fanfare. No orchestral cue, just the quiet creak of her knees against the stone. With both hands, she laid the scarf flat at the foot of the monument. The insignia faced upward now, golden thread glinting under the sunlight. Her fingers pressed gently into the fabric, smoothing its edges as if to say, "I remember. I carry this." Then she rose. The crowd behind her remained still. No one clapped. No one whispered. No one dared to approach. And yet the silence had changed. Imperceptibly but undeniably. It was no longer the silence of mockery. It was the silence that comes before something breaks. Hannah took one step back from the stone, placed her right hand over her heart, and rendered a salute. It wasn't textbook perfect. Her elbow shook slightly, her wrist bent more than it should have. But it was real. She held it for 3 seconds, maybe 4, then lowered her arm, turned, and walked slowly back to her seat, head high, eyes forward, scarf left behind. What she had just done was not grand. It wasn't in the program. It wasn't noticed by the officials, not yet, but it was enough to make a few cadets glance at each other uncertainly. Enough to make one instructor shift his weight and adjust his uniform, his eyes following her without fully understanding why. No one applauded, but no one laughed either. The scarf remained at the base of the stone, unmoving, soft, defiant. It didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be there. The scarf remained at the foot of the monument, catching light with each ripple of the wind. Hannah returned to her seat at the far end of the field. No one followed. No one spoke to her. And yet, something had shifted. A stillness, heavy and expectant, settled over the assembly. Then from the reviewing stand came movement. A tall man in a full ceremonial uniform stepped down from the platform, his boots striking the concrete with slow, unwavering cadence. It took only seconds for whispers to ripple across the ranks. General Mallory. Even the cadets who'd laughed earlier straightened instinctively. General Ernest Mallory, former Chief of Special Operations Command, now retired, had come to observe the ceremony in silence, as he often did. No one expected him to speak, let alone move. But he did. Across the parade field, each step announced not power, but purpose. He walked past the officers, past the podium, past the band, and straight toward the scarf. Cadets stopped breathing. Instructors froze. At the base of the monument, he knelt, slow, solemn, and picked up the scarf with both hands. He stood, turned, and began walking again. Not back to the stand. To her. Hannah saw him coming, but didn't move. When he stopped before her, she rose instinctively, hands at her sides, eyes wide. The general's voice, when it came, didn't need amplification. "Brigadier General Cole saved my life in Ragan Province," he said, clear enough for every ear to hear. "And the men under his command saved hundreds more." Murmurs erupted across the cadet lines. "He never asked for glory. He never sought recognition," Mallory continued, "but he carried more than his share. And today, so does someone else." He held out the scarf, gently, reverently, but didn't give it back. Instead, he reached for the insignia on his own chest, a silver eagle pin faded at the edges earned decades ago. Without ceremony, he removed it, placed it in her palm, and closed her fingers around it. "For the courage to stand," he said, quieter now, "when the rest of us forget what that looks like." Silence wrapped around them again. Not the silence of omission. This one felt earned. One by one, cadets along the front row straightened. Without being prompted, without orders, hands rose to foreheads in crisp, clean salutes. Not to the general, not to the brass. To her, Hannah, the girl who didn't belong. The girl who stood anyway. Across the field, instructors followed, even the officer who had blocked her earlier. He stood now at full attention, head bowed. General Mallory stepped back, allowing the view to clear. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. Hannah, still holding the insignia, slowly lowered her gaze. Not in shame, but in humility. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. She didn't bow. She didn't speak. She stood unsteady, silent, and let the moment breathe. For the first time since her father's death, someone had said his name with honor, and for the first time they had looked at her and seen him. If you believe dignity always finds its voice, hit subscribe. The ceremony resumed, but something fundamental had changed. There were no more glances thrown Hannah's way, not mocking, not dismissive. Only stillness, only respect. As the roll call of the honored came to an end, an aide approached her quietly with a folded card. On it, the emblem of the academy, embossed in gold. Inside, a message. "With reverence, we request to enshrine Brigadier General Cole's scarf in the Hall of Valor, alongside his mission helmet and commendation record. Your presence at the dedication is not only welcome, it is required." She read the words once, then again, and closed the card with steady hands. Nearby, General Mallory remained near the monument, speaking softly with the commandant and senior officers. None of them looked hurried. None of them looked away from her now. But Hannah didn't seek their attention. She turned from the parade field, from the scarlet flags and the gleaming brass, and followed the path along the perimeter wall, where a small grove of young trees had been planted in memory of those lost in operations abroad. She walked until she found the one that bore her father's name. It was a modest tree, a newly planted sycamore, its leaves pale and trembling in the wind. At its base, the earth was soft from recent rain. Kneeling, she reached into her satchel and withdrew a small vial, sealed tightly and labeled only with a black strip. Inside it was soil. Not from home, but from the last deployment site where her father's boots had touched ground, sent to her months after his passing, by a friend in the unit. She uncapped it slowly, and with quiet hands poured it gently into the roots of the tree. The soil darkened the ground. She pressed it in with her palm. No words, no tears, just the rhythm of her breath and the stirring of leaves. A breeze rose around her, strong and sudden. The branches overhead swayed, and in that rustling hush, something sacred settled. Not triumph, not vindication, but peace. When she stood again, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Cadets, instructors, even the commandant. No one spoke, but a new kind of silence bloomed between them, not the silence of distance, but of reverence. The cadet who had insulted her, Cole Maxwell, stood behind them all, his cap in his hands, eyes fixed on the tree. He stepped forward once, then stopped. With a trembling hand, he raised a salute. No flourish, no apology, just acknowledgement. Hannah met his eyes for only a moment, then nodded, not with forgiveness but with finality. She turned back to the tree and touched the bark once, fingertips light against the living wood. The scarf would soon rest in glass and brass, but this place, this soil, would remember in roots and leaves and seasons. She stepped back onto the walkway. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, casting golden fragments across her shoulders. And from somewhere near the edge of the gathering, a voice, gentle, unseen, spoke what no protocol could command. Legacy doesn't speak. It listens, and then it stands. If you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe and leave a comment below.